I'm Rabbi Antonofsky Young Grace. Shalom to all of you, and stay tuned for Tape with Rabbi Doug.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight. But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're going to watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug.
Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're going to see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. Glad you could be with us today. My guest today is someone I've been trying to have on my show for about 5 years. And every time she came to Chicago, something came up that we didn't get together, but this time she's here for sure. Maggie Anton, welcome.
I am so pleased to finally be here, and not only that, I know the audience can't see what fantastic weather we have in Chicago. Oh my goodness,
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful fall weather is at the time we're taping. Maggie, you are, everybody knows you as the Rashi's daughter woman. Your books have mesmerized people because of their base being in Jewish lore and folklore and in Talmudic and periods of time that people just don't know about. Just for a moment to start on, your first book that we know about, Yocheved, Rashi's Daughters. This is it right here. A very, very big seller and very well-known book, which kind of brought you to the limelight. How did you start? How did you start? First of all, researching Rashi's Daughters. How did you decide to embellish on it and still keep it authentic, along with the story as it goes? How did it all come to your mind? And where did you learn about Rashi so in depth that you'd want to write about his daughters?
Okay, well, that's exactly one of the things I've been talking about for all these years. The first thing I gotta say is that I was not raised in any kind of observant household. I was raised in a socialist, secular household. My parents spoke Yiddish. I went to Kinderschule with the Workman's Circle people. I did not get an adult education, a religious education, until I actually got to be an adult. And what happened is I heard about a woman's Talmud class in 1992, taught by Rachel Adler. Now she's a professor of theology at Hebrew Union College in LA and a rabbi. Back then she didn't have her PhD yet. And she started this woman's Talmud class because this is over 20 years ago, and Southern California is the second largest Jewish community in the world, or at least it was then. But there was no place a woman could go to study Talmud.
I happen to know her, by the way. I met her. She was one of the lecturers for APAC. And I happened to meet her in Washington and attend one of her sessions. She also teaches at the conservative school. She's all over the place. Yeah. And very, very talented, intelligent woman.
Oh, extremely. And she started this class for women to study Talmud because there was no place else we could go. And I admit that the reason that I signed up for the class was because I knew that women weren't supposed to study Talmud. All you have to do is make something forbidden and it becomes immediately more attractive. So I signed up for her class. All I knew about Talmud at that time was having read The Chosen by Chaim Potok. And to my astonishment, I fell in love with Talmud. It has become my passion ever since then. But in a woman's class, Rachel taught us that Rashi, the great Talmud commentator, had no sons, only daughters. Daughters who were reputed to be learned, reputed to wear tefillin.
Yeah, right. The whole thing, if you go around the world and ask the Orthodox world, what do you know about Rashi's daughters? They'll tell you, well, there is a story that Rashi's daughter put on tefillin every day, and she was the first woman to do that. So that's the only thing we really know in general about Rashi's daughters until your books came out.
Exactly. That's what, and it was just a legend at that time. I actually did find primary sources they were learned. There's no question of that. The tefillin question is actually the definitive answer is maybe, because some women in Rashi's community did wear tefillin, and some of them wore tzitzit, not a prayer shawl like we have today. Those are not invented till the 13 or 1400s, but people in Rashi's community, like every Jew in the 11th century, they wore cloaks, four-cornered garment off the loom. And so they put tzitzis on the four corners of their cloak, and there weren't men's and women's, there were just cloaks. And a ritual manual from Rashi's time says that women, if they wear tzitzit, they have to say the blessing too. And women in Rashi's community were doing lots of the men's mitzvot. I was so astonished by this, and also that nobody knew about it. The black hole of Jewish history seemed to be 11th and 12th century, even though Rashi is such an important historical figure for us. So in all the time trying to find out, were they really learned? Did they wear tefillin? What did they do? I came up with all this information and decided to write a trilogy of novels about them, kind of to share what I had learned. And so there you have book 2, Miriam. Rashi had 3 daughters.
Miriam. So you really took the little bit that you could find out about these women and built a whole novel about their lives.
We actually know a lot about women in general from Rashi's community. He has a lot of responsa that talk about questions for women. I mean, the responsa literature of that time period is like the Dear Abby of the Middle Ages. People wrote to the rabbis with all kinds of problems, and they've collected that. And of course we have Rashi's Torah commentary, Talmud commentaries, where he talks about life in his city. And even more so, we have from the Tosafot, particularly Rashbam and Rabbeinu Tam, who are Yocheved's sons, they talk about their mother. Good
It's
Jewish
wonderful,
boys.
It's wonderful. And the third book in the Rashi trilogy is Rachel. And do you think that your artist who drew the pictures on the front, do you think that they depicted how you visioned these women?
They definitely did. Certainly that's how I envision them now. I chose the covers. I had cover control. And we deliberately picked, there's no 11th century art, and no pictures of Rashi's daughters at all. So we looked for Renaissance paintings because they're beautiful. It has to be attractive. Also, the cover of Yocheved is Leonardo da Vinci, and very conveniently, he's dead, so he doesn't charge any money for us to use his picture. And we could change the color of the hair and the eyes to match how they described the women. And so they're all Renaissance artists' drawings, and I picked the ones that I just kind of imagined how they looked.
So you found yourself studying Talmud, you found yourself delving into Rashi's daughters and loving Talmud, and so you've decided that you are going to spend your life writing about Talmudic times. And you've come out with a new subject. You're into the daughters of famous people. Rab Hisda's daughter is your first of 2 books in this series so far.
And that's all it is. There's a 2-book, it's done. There's only a 2-book series. There's no, the word I think is duology, but nobody ever heard of it.
So tell, since you know, and you're the author, tell people who Rab Hisda was. Because those of us who've studied, know of Rab Hisda's writings, but tell our viewers, because I think a lot of them are going to want to pick up your books.
Well, certainly, if I thought that people didn't know about Rashi in 11th century France, Rab Hisda, who lives in 3rd century Babylonia, is even more unknown. Most people can't even pronounce it. Rab Hisda is one of the rabbis who are creating Talmud. He's one of the Amoraim who early on in the Talmud, and he lives in Babylonia, which is now modern-day Iraq. Back then, this was Babylonia. It was the Fertile Crescent, the breadbasket of the Middle East. Now it's a desert. But back then, it was between the Tigris and the Euphrates, and they cut canals.
And it was the most thriving Jewish community at the time in the world, where Israel had a very small Jewish community after the exile. Babylonia was the place to be. It was where the Talmud was written, where it was created, where the great houses of study were in that time period, and so on and so forth.
Scholars say there were 1 million Jews in Babylonia at the time that Rab Hisda is living there.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? So how do you delve into Rab Hisda's daughters? How do you
It's very tricky because it's daughter. He has 2 daughters, but the books are about one daughter in particular. And it was very tricky, of course, because all of my information essentially comes from the Talmud. These people are not referenced in any other history books. Okay, there's books who's who in the Talmud, but that comes from the Talmud. So, and there's no index. So going through the Talmud, trying to find information about Rab Hisda, about his daughter, about she has 2 husbands, and the rest of the people in the family, it was quite a challenge, and I learned a tremendous amount by finding that. But there was the thing that got me started on Rab Hisda's daughter was one sugya, one piece of Talmud in particular from Bava Batra, where she's a young girl. She's maybe 8, 10 years old. She's, depending on your translation, she's either sitting on her father's lap or she's sitting next to him in his classroom. So this is kind of interesting. And he calls up his 2 best students and asks her, who do you want to marry? Now, this is an interesting question. First of all, not too many girls in 4th century Babylonia even had a choice of husbands. And also, Rab Hisda didn't take her in a private room, like you would think. This is an embarrassing question. But he asks her in the classroom in front of the 2 students themselves. And she replies, both of them. Like, whoa, that's interesting. And after what I'm sure was a lengthy silence, the younger of the 2, arguably more quick-witted, says, I'll be the last one. And the Talmud tells us that's what happens. First she marries the older one, Rami Bar Hama, has some kids with him, then she's widowed, and then she marries the second one, Abba Bar Joseph, also known in the Talmud as Rava. He's the man that is 4,000 times in the Talmud, the most famous rabbi in the Talmud. She marries him, she has a bunch more kids with him, and essentially lives happily ever after with Rava. I'm going, what a girl, what a woman. How could she have the audacity to say both of them? I really want to know her story, but I also knew if anyone was going to write her story, it would be me.
There you go.
And there I went. I started looking through the Talmud for stuff about Rab Hisda, about his daughter, about Rami Bar Hama, about Rava, piecing all the pieces of Talmud together into actually, these 2 novels.
Now, as we move on, I want to talk about Babylonia at this time here. Babylonia was a very mystical place. It was a place where many people believed in magic. There were sorcerers, enchantresses, which is, by the way, the name of your Enchantress is your latest book, the second in the series of Rab Hisda's daughter. And Babylonia was an amazing place, and it was also a place of great study and knowledge and wisdom. Tell me, how do we, as Jewish people, and you as an author, to put this all together, how do we accept the fact that there was great religiosity, great study, and yet there was this magical era of people that I don't know who believed, who didn't believe, who honored and gave great honor to people who were considered to be in that realm of magic, or as an enchantress, as people respected that a woman who might be someone who is able to conjure up these thoughts and ideas. How do we justify it all Jewishly?
This was when I started researching Rab Hisda and his daughter, and I had no idea that sorcery was going to be part of this at all. Although actually, I shouldn't have been surprised, because Babylonia at this time is the land we associate with flying carpets and genies and open sesame. And the word magic actually comes from the word magi, who were the Zoroastrian priests. And the Jews at that time are living under the Persians. The Romans are in Israel and things are not so good, but under the Persians, very benevolent government. Zoroastrians is a monotheistic religion, very similar to Judaism. And the Zoroastrians were very happy to let the Jews have their own self-government, as long as they paid their taxes. And so the Jews actually could really thrive. And the Zoroastrians were also, as you said, a mystical people. They were the folks who came up with astrology, with all the astrological signs and the zodiac. And Jews absolutely accepted this as well. The 12 tribes of Jews of Israel are associated with the 12 zodiac signs, and also the 12 months of the year with the same zodiac signs. And it's interesting, for example, the zodiac sign for Tishrei, when we have the high holidays and we're judged by the heaven, whether you're going to be in the book of life or not, that astrological sign is the scales. You know, not surprising. And actually, Zoroastrians also believed that once a year at the new year, you were judged as to how many good deeds you did and how many you didn't, and whether you would get to live through the year. It was a common belief. The astrological sign for Nisan is the lamb. Don't ask me about the crab. I don't know how that fits in. But this was the milieu of the time. And the rabbis, as I started looking through here, through the Talmud, I discover there's a lot of sorcery in the Talmud. There's actually magic, demon. There are actually more demons named in the Talmud than there are women. But I found a sugya I come across. Rab Hisda casts a spell. He casts a spell to counteract the spell of a sorceress. And I learned that, according to the Talmud, the rabbis on the Beit Din in the Sanhedrin had to be sorcerers. They had to be powerful sorcerers. Because if a sorceress or some magic user came into court, they could cast a spell and manipulate the proceedings. People would believe them and not the other. So the Talmud teaches that the rabbis, the judges, had to be such a good sorcerers themselves that, first of all, they could recognize if magic is happening, and two, be a better sorcerer than any of the people who came in the court, so that they could counteract whatever sorcery someone is trying to use.
Now, there are people who dispute this and say it doesn't make sense. How do you justify that?
Well, first of all, okay, this is straight from the Talmud.
Right, I know. There are people who are saying it's misinterpreted. So how do we?
Well, there's lots of magic throughout the Talmud, and the way that the rabbis saw, most of the magic in the Talmud is healing. It's spells and incantations to protect people from demons, from the evil eye. And in the 21st century, we all know what that is. Even, I don't have to explain it to anyone.
Right.
And they believed, and people still do, that illness and misfortunes are caused by demons and evil eye. And frankly, if you want to say bacteria and viruses, and they said demons, this, it makes more sense.
So, but today, what do? We don't go and ask for a incantation. We say Tehillim, which is sort of an incantation of our own, let's say, to implore God. We say Mishaberach prayer in the synagogue, and we check our mezuzahs and our tefillin to make sure they're kosher. So there's certainly a spiritual, mystical connection between them today. Would you consider this to be sort of connected to what they were into back then?
Absolutely, especially you mentioned the Mishaberach, which is the only time in a Jew's life where we're named with the person's mother's name.
Right.
And in the Talmud, they say when you need an incantation or spell for healing, an amulet for healing, they are written with the person's mother's name. That's where there comes from. But Jewish magic called upon angels. The incantations and spells we have, and we have actually archaeological evidence, they're clearly written by educated, literate Jews, and they call upon names of angels, all kinds of angels. They call upon Adonai Sebaot and like secret names of God. But particularly they call upon angels. And we have magic manuals from this time that list various angels and what their responsibilities are. The Jews saw that God is up on the throne creating universes and doing the big stuff, and the angels are the bureaucracy. They're doing the everyday tasks. And we might compare it today that if the street light on your street goes out, you do not call the President of the United States. You call the Department of the electric department or water and power to come fix it. And even better, if your brother, your cousin, or someone you know works for the department, you call them and they'll come and fix your streetlight. And that's how Jews saw what we would call magic. They saw that certain angels are associated with certain kinds of healing and to get rid of certain demons, and a sorceress who had learned all these things could call upon these particular angels to help her client, who might be pregnant and they need an incantation against miscarriage, and she would call upon the angels who are in charge of that kind of stuff to protect her client. And it's kind of a fuzzy border, a prayer, a blessing if you're calling upon angels. And also when you think about the healing prayers, we know and healing incantations, We know today the placebo effect is real. People who take a placebo get better. Even when they know it's a placebo, they get better. So you can well imagine that someone who's sick calls upon a sorceress to come and call upon angels to get rid of the demons who are making this person sick, that they might very well have gotten better. They might have just gotten better coincidentally, but there's something psychological, the placebo effect, whatever we want to call it, people would have gotten better. Considering that the other healers at this time were bloodletters, the sorceresses at least probably aren't hurting anybody, and they might be helping. And they didn't really have a whole lot of other kinds of medicine that they could do. But it was still fascinating to me to learn all of this.
It is fascinating. It is fascinating. We are here on Taped with Rabbi Doug, and my guest is Maggie Anton, and she's an amazing author. Her latest book we're talking about right now, Enchantress, which is about Rab Hisda's daughter in the Babylonian Talmudic times, and the folklore around Babylonia at that time, and we're going to talk more about it, so stay with us here and we'll be right back.
Once they've outgrown their toddler seat, they're still not ready for adult safety belts alone. 4'9" is the magic number. Until then, kids need a booster seat. Make sure your little pumpkin gets there safely. Visit boosterseat.gov.
Hello, I'm Rabbi Joseph Lushkin, and you're watching Taped with Rabbi Doug.
Welcome back. I'm here with Maggie Anton. She is the author of the Rashi's Daughters series and Rab Hisda's Daughter series, and this is the second in the series, Enchantress, which is her latest novel. And do people come along and say, you know, your book isn't really a novel, it's more reality? Do people come to you and say you've brought reality, the times of life in Babylon, Talmudic times, to life in your books?
I've done, it was 5 years of research behind this, even more research with Rashi's Daughters. I am talking, certainly with Rashi's Daughters and Rashi, historical figures. I'm trying to bring their lives to life, and we don't really have history from a woman's perspective unless it's historical novels. There's history, for the most part, is written by men, for men, about men, and usually about kings and soldiers, not ordinary people. So the research that I wove in is to bring their lives to the world. And here's where I have the caveat, the difference between the historian and the historical novelist. The historian must be correct. The historical novelist cannot be wrong. As long as what I write could have happened, might have happened, as long as I have research that says Jewish women in Rashi's community behaved this way, then I can extrapolate that his daughters behave this way too, and weave it into, of course, a novel. Same thing with Babylonia and Rab Hisda's daughter. The Talmud is full of details of home life. I mean, there's chapters where you're talking about cooking on holidays, how you do kashrut, what the furniture is, how you observe Shabbat. The Talmud has just full of everyday living details. And again, I wove those into the story of Rab Hisda's daughter, along with the magic that is also in the Talmud. The hardest part for me was there was so much Talmud stuff I wanted to use that I couldn't. I mean, I'm just writing books. The Talmud is a whole bookcase of books, and what I left on the cutting room floor, shall we say, there just wasn't room for everything I wanted to put in there.
But there's room for more in future novels and future thoughts. Have you ever thought of short stories for Jewish magazines? And you're in LA based, the Jewish Journal, which is a very well-known Jewish magazine there. People write stories for it often, and they publish them. Have you ever thought of going to short stories, and not just novels, but a short story here and there about a subject that kind of what your appetite is?
I haven't thought of short stories. I have written quite a few articles about my research. Like, for example, Rashi has a really great commentary on Noah. And actually I used it in book 2, Miriam. And when the movie Noah came out, I wrote an article for the LA Jewish Journal on what Rashi says about Noah, comparing it to the movie. And they put that in there. So I'm writing articles about my research because the novels are just novels. They don't cover all the vast amount of interesting stuff I've learned that I can't fit in the novel. So I'm squeezing it into articles.
So I also write articles for the Chicago Jewish News for the Torah column there, and I always try and find and bring out something besides the basic Torah script, but a lesson that's hidden between to bring out that will touch someone who's reading it.
So that's the kind of stuff I've been doing, and a lot of blogging, which didn't exist when Rashi's Daughters came out, but now online.
Well, you have a lot of fans. You have a lot of fans. So many fans. Do you actually get the opportunity to communicate with a lot of them by email or a blog or?
Yes, my email is out there to the world. So I get fan mail, I get questions, I get all kinds of emails, and I try to be very good about answering. It may take me a few months. Especially if I'm on book tour, like I am now in Chicago, I don't really have time to answer emails, but I will when I get home and do that. And sometimes people ask me very complicated questions, where's the research beside this? Actually, somebody just emailed me and asked for a love spell. So I was like, great, that's all I need is to have people asking me for magic. But, and some people want to know more. My favorite emails are the ones when people say, oh, I've read your book, I want to study Talmud. Where can I go to study Talmud?
That's great. And you give them resources.
And I give them the resources. And actually now, there's English translations. There's no excuse for any Jews, no matter liberal, Orthodox women. You don't have to know Aramaic anymore. There's good English translations. There's Talmud classes online. You don't need to have to go to a synagogue to do it. So really, everybody should be studying Talmud now.
I love it. And here, in the Orthodox high school, Ida Crown Jewish Academy, the girls do have a choice to take Talmud if they want as part of their studies in high school. And so I just love knowing that Jewish high schools now, the girls can study Talmud the same as the boys. Yeah. It's no longer forbidden. It's not even discouraged. The girls are really flocking to study Talmud. Well, I'm just so impressed with what you're doing and how you're doing it, and your books are so enthralling. And I hope that my viewers will get a chance to check out the Rashi's Daughter series, the Rab Hisda's Daughter series, Enchantress, the latest book right here. Just amazing. I can't thank you enough for being here in Chicago. I'd love to have you back when your next book comes out to talk about the newest subject. Remember, if you want to check out our website, www.tvrabbi.com. You can also see former shows on the web. If you want to know more about getting Maggie's books, you can email us info@tvrabbi.com, and I'll get you that information. And I can't thank you enough for being on the show. Welcome to Chicago. Welcome to the show, and much success with all you're doing and with your studies and your research, because I really am impressed and very, very honored to have you with us here on the show. And thank you for being with us. Remember, we're on every time, the same time, next week, same day, and hope to see you right here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Thanks again to Maggie Anton. Shalom, everyone.
Shalom.
Talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug. Talking about Rabbi Doug on your TV show. Well, he's the rabbi for me. Anytime you need. You're gonna get married or you're gonna die. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight.
This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.